Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. My name is Lynette. Today we're going to talk about how to stop overthinking and find peace in the situations that have you spinning around in your head. I want to talk to you about getting that inner peace and about first time that you get a spiritual answer. In fact, today we're going to talk about walking the spiritual path, getting answers that are beyond human comprehension. When you get answers from the spiritual world, it's different. There's a peace that comes with it. But in doing so, you've got to be able to discern the difference between your own thoughts and the spiritual thoughts. And I'm going to go over with you how to do that. And it's such a wonderful thing. Friends that you can vent to are wonderful. Therapists are wonderful. But sometimes when you're laying in bed, you don't have access to either. So you want to find a peace and a calm with the situation right where you're at. The other day I was speaking with someone who was feeling pretty bad about something. So I decided to share a part of my life with them that perhaps they could relate to, and it would make them feel better. And in doing so, they turned around and threw it back in my face. So I was a little consumed with what happened. Here I was doing a nice gesture, and this person, instead of taking what I was trying to do, what I was trying to say, and entrusting them with something that was personal in my life, that they would turn around and use it against me. So I was a little distraught about that, and for about a day and a half, I was letting it loop around in my head, which we should never do, but I let it go for a day and a half. And then finally, I thought, this is enough. So I sat quietly, and I know that we've talked about prayer and meditation. So this is kind of the same thing. What I did, I presented this situation to God, and then I was just quiet until I got an answer. And I did get an answer. I can't remember what wording I used to bring it up to him, but it was twofold. And I got both answers. And in doing so, I got an absolute peace. The situation went away almost like it never happened. I was able to go about my business without that thought racing through my mind any longer. And that is a pretty wonderful place to be when you have a source connection that you can bring your troubles to and get direct answers that give you peace. As I said, I couldn't even tell you today what I prayed. And I can't even tell you the answers that came to me because at this point, it really doesn't matter. The point is that I became completely peaceful. And it was like somebody took that thought that had just happened right out of my head. But there was another time that somebody was doing something behind my back and the back of my family. And for some reason, I wasn't thinking about it because I didn't know anything about it. But out of the blue, in a brief moment, that wisdom was given to me. So it was really interesting because I chose to act on it as if it were a fact. And it was a fact, as it turns out. And nobody ever asked me how I knew this was going on. I guess they just assumed somebody told me. And somebody did tell me, and I believe it was God. So what I'm saying is when you walk in a spiritual path, you have an additional guidance. You not only have what's available to us here on this planet, but you have a connection to the Almighty and to the All-Knowing. And that is priceless. I'm going to go over making that connection. As we're starting out in this and as we're getting spiritual guidance, one of the ways that you can tell that it is coming from God is because you get this inner peace, you get this relaxing peace. And I'm going to jump around for a minute here. Regarding peace, you have to learn how to test the spirits. If you're not getting an absolute peace, if you know within your logical mind that it is not the correct answer, you have to act on that too. You have to be strong and you have to be discerning, because your own mind will try to give you messages that sometimes cause confusion because you think, is this coming from God or isn't it? So you've got to know right from wrong. No matter what you're doing, if you feel a nudge to do something and yet in your heart you know it's wrong, then you follow your heart. So it's absolutely possible to walk in the Spirit and get guidance from God directly. But it's also very, very important to be discerning and to know right from wrong and to know how to test the spirits. One of the first times that I had this experience is I just started going to a church, and I was trying to quit smoking at the time. So I went up to the altar and I was just praying naturally. And all of a sudden I felt this, like, it's hard to explain, but I felt this white light come over me. And this voice, this audio voice, kind of inner, outer at the same time, said it's time to quit smoking. And I literally felt the desire leave my body. And I don't know what it looked like outwardly. But after that happened, a young man said to me, God touched you tonight, didn't he? However, I didn't want to ask him. I didn't want to ruin where I was at. Or I was in such a zone, I guess you would say, myself, that it didn't matter what he had to say. But he did see something that was going on with me. So many times things will be going on and I feel like I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. But I think, oh, I can take it from here. And I'll be darned if it doesn't backfire. So it's very important to walk in obedience, even when we can't logically think that this is the right direction. And I know we've discussed redirecting. And that is when you're going along and things aren't going your way. It doesn't mean you're on the wrong track by any means. It actually means you're on the right track, because something is guiding you to perhaps something is better for you or keeping you in a safer situation. I realize it can be a bit confusing when you're walking a spiritual path. A while back, I came into some money. To me, it was more than I had, put it that way. And so I wanted to make a good investment. Well, ironically, this woman contacted me, and she was making audio tapes for children. And she asked me if I'd do a commercial for her. And I started talking to her about the business end. And I thought it sounded wonderful. Well, she asked for X amount of dollars. That night I was thinking about it, should I, shouldn't I? And I felt uncomfortable not giving her what she needed. I'm pretty sure I could have talked her down to less. But I felt uncomfortable not giving her what she needed. So I thought that was my go-ahead, my message. Well, so I gave her the money, and she gave up on the whole idea. So consequently, I lost my money. And I got a bit confused. Why did that happen? Why did I feel to give her that amount of money? Why wasn't I put in a place where I didn't take that loss? All I can think of, and sometimes this happens in life too, it could have been twofold. It could have been me learning not to be so naive in the amount of money I lost. Although it was a great deal to me, it wasn't the end of the world. And so on her end, she may have needed it, or maybe she was taught a lesson, who knows. But I learned to be a little more discerning myself and to not feel like just because I get a message that I know this is it, because it does need to be tested. you do have to know right from wrong. You do have to know if it's doable. In other words, with this lady, every time I was thinking about giving her less, I felt uncomfortable. And now, in hindsight, I'm not sure why that was. I had a situation happen just the other day where I wanted to do something in a certain way, not giving regards for what I felt was the best thing to do or praying about it. But I did it, and I felt almost like there wasn't clarity. I felt it's like it didn't have a direction. So I decided to back up and put things back where they were. And I felt like a clarity and a peace with that. So rather than me taking over, I am trying, and I plan to listen and do things in the right order and in the right moment. It's so exciting when you get the answers in a spiritual format. But like we talked about before, you need to quiet your mind enough to do that. And a lot of people get that when they meditate. As I said before, prayer is you asking God. Meditation is you listening for his answer. And some people may not look at it as that, but it really is basically the same thing. When you quiet your mind enough, when you let all those rambling thoughts go, and you get the answers within yourself. And how wonderful and how exciting to be able to reset your mind and reset a situation and perhaps look at it in a different way. Day after day, time after time, this goes on and on. I'm so grateful for the resources we have, therapists, friends, whatever. But to be able to talk to God whenever you want to, and it just is a matter of quieting your mind and calming your mind. It's like the situation I gave you earlier about that girl throwing what I said to her back in my own face. I think the reason I let it go for a day and a half is because I couldn't seem to quiet my own mind enough to get the answers. So you need to first calm yourself down. And when you feel a quietness, a peace, where you can relax and just listen for the answers, just open your mind for the answers that come in, then you get that overall peace. You get the answer to the situation. And most of the time, it's looking at the same situation in a different light than you ever thought existed. Sometimes I'll get a text or whatever, and I've learned to kind of wait a little bit to answer it. Sometimes I'm grateful that I did that because my initial reaction wouldn't have been as good if I hadn't waited. So many times we're in a place where we want to resolve this situation right now. The Bible says, you'll know a man by his works. And so it's really very, very simple. I don't know the Bible real well to be able to recite everything to you, but there are certain things that have resonated with me. And one is you'll know a man by his works. So if you're planning to do business with somebody who's lying, cheating, then that is a clear indication of the person that you're dealing with and what they're offering you, whether it be verbally or physically or whatever. So even with those that you let in your life, even relationships, you can't fool yourself. If they are liars or cheaters, you got to realize that that's who they are. But learning the truth about any situation, anybody, it directs you and keeps you from harm's way in different ways, whether it be financial, physical, emotional. But you've got to be honest with yourself about who and what you're dealing with. So in other words, as you walk this path and you learn how to find peace within yourself and you learn how to let the Holy Spirit give you messages, and you're able to walk in really a supernatural way. But you've also got to be discerning. You've also got to be able to let things go that aren't lining up with who you are. Because as I mentioned earlier, when you're on the right track, when you're seeking spiritual guidance, and when you're getting spiritual guidance, you will walk in more clarity and in more peace, and you aren't giving up anything. Sometimes you feel like you're giving up something, but you're really not. So in closing, I want to say that communication with God is the best thing in the world. But you do need to have a certain amount of discernment. And you do want to make sure that the answers are from the source himself. I thank you for listening. I hope this was helpful. God bless you, and I will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.